So I've been working on the DNS stuff. So I've got an initial PR that's basically just about ready to land. I think it's just waiting for like a final approval.
And anyone else? So Lynn, are you managing the overall ambient beta project?
I'm not currently. I wrote a doc a while ago. I don't even know if we have consensus on the beta. What needs to be, declare beta for ambient, but I haven't done any work related to the board. I mean, if you have bandwidth, feel free to jump in.
And this is the document you mentioned, right? This one here?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess this doc, I'm looking at a list of approvers. This was never approved. So maybe the first order of business is just review this doc, finish reviewing this doc, and get it approved.
Yeah,
and also,
and also keep in mind, everybody, each of us may have different priority, right? So if you need something in beta, the most important thing is actually have, identified person be willing to work on that. That's the biggest thing we have to look out for, right?
And Lynn, these tasks here are what you sent me in the project, right? Or is this a little different?
You mean like the board?
Yeah, the project board on GitHub.
Yeah, so the board was established probably a few months ago. It needs to be refreshed.
Okay.
I don't think anyone have taken the time to refresh it. Part of it wasn't refreshed. It was also because the doc has been socialized, hasn't been reaching consensus yet.
Have we been making progress towards consensus? Like, have you been? I don't remember seeing the doc for a while, so I feel like it's just kind of got forgotten, maybe, by a lot of folks. I mean, do you want to just kind of drive that forward and like maybe that's the focus of next week's meeting?
Yeah, I think we made some progress. So last time when we meet about the document, we mentioned the biggest thing before the doc can be approved is to API stability, right? So I think there are some progress made towards that API stability portion. Particularly, there are some changes around like service entry, workload entry, that API will continue to use except with optional address. I think there are also some discussion on how authorization policy is supposed to be bind to a waypoint. I don't know if that's been decided. I think it might have already been decided.
So Lynn, I think what I'm asking is who owns this document, or is it you? Effectively, like yes, we understand there are open questions, but somebody needs to drive them to resolution, I guess. Is that you or somebody else owning this?
Yeah, so I started the document, so I can certainly be owner, but if there's somebody else who is willing to be co-owner, happy to have the help too.
I mean, I think that's fine as long as we have somebody, that owns it. So I guess the action for you is to just kind of drive that, right? Like, throw it on if there's unresolved stuff, let's throw it on, next week's meeting. Let's get the appropriate people, there and figure it out.
Then if you need help, I am more than willing to help you drive this. If we're just talking about going through and make sure all the items are closed.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about how we tackle this, right? I don't think it would be easy to reach consensus on what needs to be happen to declare ambient in beta, and I don't want that discussion blocking everybody else implementing code in ambient to driving towards beta. So I think we should do try to get consensus in parallel. We should probably have the board accurately reflecting these work items. So maybe, Francis, you could potentially help with the board if that's okay, to make sure the board captures all the different work items, and then we can. I'll try to tag different people and see if we can drive consensus on what needs to be in beta, and then in parallel we can get the board updated. Keith, what do you think?
I mean, is it safe to? I'm wondering if we can make this easier. Is it safe to say that if someone is willing, if a company, if a vendor, somebody's willing to put person hours behind one of these tasks, that it's going to make it to beta? Like, is that a pretty safe statement?
Yes, I think so. The biggest thing we can decide is the resource, like any open source projects, right? Yeah, if there are resource backing for it within the time window, I think the confidence of having it part of the beta would be much higher.
Right, I could completely agree. So I'm wondering, can we circuit this? Like, we've got the things that have names on them, and they've got commitments on them. We can put that as part of a beta candidate, and then we see what's left. If there are things that are left that we as a community wouldn't be comfortable shipping a beta without, then I think that's part of the conversation. That's where conversation happens, right? Where the people who are making quote unquote funding decisions can see, oh, if I put somebody on this, then this is what's going to get left out. Maybe I take half of people can make decisions about who works on what. We can also look for other community contributions from folks who might not be Istio vendors to do some of this work. But I think that we've got names, we've got a sense of what's being worked on. Maybe we start by just putting that in the beta and see what we're going to be missing. Because as it stands right now, it's not easy to see what is part of what we're working toward as far as ambient beta, what might slip, and where resources might be needed. Does that make sense?
Yes, you're right on. In fact, that's what I've been asking folks to do when I first present this. So far, I have to say, Keith, you might be the only person added your name. So we definitely need more people to kind of sign up for different items on the stock, right?
Yeah, maybe I don't know. For the folks feel like the doc is not the right right place for this. I'm seeing some comments in the chat about potentially putting this in a project. What's going to be best for everybody to be able to consistently kind of track this stuff?
So here's my 2 cents. The content of the board, especially where we draw the line in terms of what's in scope for beta, will need to come from this drive ambient to beta doc. Because as far as I know, this is the only doc that we have right now that says these are the items that's needed for beta, the P0s and P1s and P2 and so on. So that said, we don't need to have this doc block the work that we have in the board. There are items on here that I'm just going to go out there and say that all the P0s identified in this doc are in scope for beta, and we can have people working on those and see who are the resources working on those. And if we don't have a resource working on any of these items, let's ask the community for volunteers. So I can take a stab at organizing the board and make sure that we are tracking these items in the board, looking for assignments. Then can you lead on closing on this doc, essentially scope for beta?
Yeah, that sounds good. So do I have the right approval on the doc? So right now I listed the TOC members, but we could potentially adjust the approval as if needed.
Let me ask another way. Besides the 5 here, are we missing anyone? Okay, I take that as a no. So then this is it.
Another question I have too, we've got a couple of those spot movers there. Is there anything that is in your minds that is holding this doc up from being approved? Anything like egregious or glaring?
I see plenty of open comments.
So is that another action then or I guess that's part of Lynn's action, right? To get closure on some of
Yeah.
these then?
I think if anything, we should drive to have these comments closed or get to
Yeah.
a consensus.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Right. Cool.
Okay, so then it's decided. Then we'll lead closing on this comment, and I will work on organizing the board. I will reach out to, so Keys, I'll probably reach out to you and then as well as Nathan and John about the content of the board right now, and map these to the items that are called out here.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so there's that item there, and thank you for bringing it up. Anything else?
I just thought of this because it popped up in Slack a couple of days ago. Seeing a couple of a little bit of community feedback from people looking at ECO releases, and they don't feel that they're missing ambient announcements here and there. Do we feel like we've done a good enough job at kind of getting the word out about ambient and having appropriate docs on the SCOIO page? Right now, there are 2 docs on SCOIO that I can tell. Do we feel like that's sufficient? Do we have any more in the queue?
Oh yeah,
or do we
that's
feel
a
like we
great
can-
question. I think we need more work. And honestly, I would prefer our homepage. Maybe we have a like a banner saying, "Hey, Ambient is in 1.18 as alpha," something like that, right? Because that's the most of people confused. People are confused about whether Ambient is in 1.18, and people are confused the status of Ambient. So we can make it as a banner on the issue.io, right? Everybody goes there, they would be able to see it. Fair.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I don't know if Mitch is on the call, but I know Mitch and I are working on a survey, and I think Mitch is trying to track down what channels he can utilize from the the Cloud Native Foundation to get that out there. So I know we're trying to attack it from that angle.
Okay, that's a good point. We should probably engage CNCF for this too.
I don't know if it's that tricky. We we sent out a release announcement and we barely mentioned ambient when that's all we've been working on for the past year and talking about. So it's not that people aren't seeing it in CNCF and stuff. Like they're literally going to a release notes doc and there's no mention of ambient in it. So.
Yeah, that's true as well.
Oh, we can obviously the CNCF stuff's great as well. Just saying that it's maybe not the only thing we need to work on.
Well, unless I'm incorrect, I think we can easily fix that by just adding ambient to these announcements.
I think someone may have sent a PR, but I'm not sure. Certainly the documentation around ambient and really the whole project could use a lot of love if someone is willing to put in some time.
That was going to be my question. Like, do we feel like the people, I see at least maybe a mismatch potentially in the people who are experts on ambient and the people who are writing about ambient, just because those, there's not always that time to do that, which is certainly understandable. Do we feel like we need to, a couple of ways we can approach that. One is we can make more people confident enough on ambient to write about it, who aren't necessarily the ones making much of PRs, or those those of us making PRs and actively working on it, who've got the expertise, dedicate some time to writing it.
Yeah.
I think maybe
Yeah,
there's aspects of both that are useful.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is our doc standards are really high. Like every time I work on some changes to our doc, from blog to documentation, it always take like 5x of the time than the initial time I put in, right? The feedback and everything. It's just we have a very high standards, which might deter people from contribution. So that's something it was keep in mind too.
How do we solve? Well, I mean, the Istio docs didn't just come out of nowhere. So how did we solve this before?
We had a large handful of people that dedicated most of their time to writing the docs.
There was a working group for docs at one point, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was, but it dissolved because people didn't want to be just contribute to docs.
Well, I think at one point we consolidated all the work groups.
Yeah, but doc group had a bigger problem before the consolidation because no one is willing to be the lead for that work group, right?
Lynn, regarding the standards for docs, have those changed since that working group was dissolved?
I would say no, but doc standards has been pretty high in general.
Yeah, I don't see that as something that can be changed. I mean, the last thing we want is a lot of terrible docs, right? So I don't.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just saying that's one factor to consider.
Yeah, no, understand.
So Niranjan had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, thanks. This may have already sort of been answered by the discussion, but is there some user-facing doc currently about which custom resources are supported by Ambient, or is that also like one of the areas like we were looking to add at some point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at the beta document, we do have we need to think out like the annotation and labels, but most of the API will continue to support. Except the auth policy, there may be some semantic changes. So, but to your point, we needed that clarity in the doc, which we haven't done it.
Eric?
One thing I think I recall, and John is probably the creator of it, but I do think there was at least an issue created where we talked about what ambient docs were going to be needed. So we should have at least sort of a documentation roadmap.
Yeah, we do. We have an issue. Well, John started putting some thoughts. I think I might have added a few things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, to go back to the doc work group, I don't know that the standards have become more difficult. Actually, they probably have become less. But I think the one of the key issues is probably the number of reviewers has become much less. So the unfortunate thing, you know, that just means there's fewer people to review the PRs to try to get the feedback maybe in as timely a manner as we used to. I know I have a couple that I have to get to that have been sitting on my plate for a while to get to, and I just haven't had time to get there.
Is this maybe like an issue for the TOC?
Well, the TOC basically had talked about this issue, and at the point in time, the TOC was basically becoming reviewers, and or they had created an additional group of reviewers to try to help with that. But I think that's probably, you know, gone away as well. So, I mean, TOC could probably try to, re-review that. That's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's probably worth just revisiting the topic in general. I don't know that anything will come of it, but
yeah, I don't know that, you know, they can do a lot to say, hey, we need more reviewers, and how do we get that?
yeah, unless you know, all of these companies are willing to volunteer resources, you know, it's just not going to happen.
Well, you know, I know some of the names that were on that list of volunteers to help review have, you know, changed jobs and gone off. So that list has dwindled. So maybe we could do something to try to fluff it back up again.
So
Yeah.
sure.
So basically, what doc reviewer requirements is higher than code, because doc reviewer right now needs one maintainer from the code networking, for example. On top of that, it also needs an English reviewer.
Right.
Why? I mean, that's not enforced, at least in the code. Maybe reviewers are artificially adding that enforcement.
Which enforcement, John?
I mean,
the grammatical or
there's
the
no
pushing
code
back?
that's requiring that requirement. Maybe some person that is in the docs maintainers group is saying that they want someone to look at it. But that's not a real requirement. But I think it's good that that is happening, because there is two bonus. There's people that know how to write docs, and then there's people that know what the docs are saying is correct. And without those two, it's worse than not having docs, right?
Right.
It's different in code. Like, actually, it's not that different in code. In Google, we have readability reviewers who are experts at the language, and then we also have, of course, the experts at the code base. Now, we obviously don't do that in Istio, which is perfectly fine, but it's not a crazy topic, I think, to have two different sets of reviewers reviewing different things, because we don't have networking docs writers and telemetry docs writers and all these different groups. If we did, that would be amazing. We would just assign to them and we'd be done. But there's all sorts of PRs that I get pinged on as a networking reviewer, and I look at it and it's totally dangerous thing to document that is either wrong or misleading, or, you know, steering users down the wrong path. So,
I mean, the unfortunate reality is that it takes a long time for new people to become maintainers and reviewers and to learn the code base. Like, Istio is a complicated piece of software, and so we want to make sure that we are being safe with our documentation, but it doesn't solve the problem when people leave or no longer work on Istio. It takes time to replenish those people, and I think we're just in that situation right now. I've got people who are trying. Like, it takes, I think, 30 PR to become a maintainer, which isn't I think it's fairly reasonable, all things considered, with this just complexity. But I mean, it just takes time. Sorry, Nathan, I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, with respect to like docs, though, I'm not sure there's been a real concerted effort in the program to really replace, kind of replenish the the lack of the working group that was dissolved. So I feel like that's why I was kind of like thinking maybe it's a POC topic. Maybe we should revisit, like, seeing if we can get folks to dedicate some resources to actually, making this a little bit of a smoother process. But obviously it's maybe that's not in the cards.
Hey,
No, I agree with Nate. We should at least, from a TOC standpoint, we should probably talk about it. We can add that to the next month's agenda.
So my take on this is this, right? I look at docs at the same level of importance as release. Without the RMs, we don't have a product. We don't have a product release. Without docs, we also don't have a product release. So the way we solve the RM problems, we have rotations, and we have each of the vendors essentially nominating people for RMs, and we are going to need a similar body for docs, given that this is the first major update to Istio docs in a long time. So Eric, Lynn, can one of you put this on a TOC agenda?
Yes.
Thank you, Eric.
hey, I just mentioned this on the chat, but I'm a new member and I would be happy to find ways to contribute either with docs or code. Is there a ramp up roadmap or a mentoring procedure that I can work with to kind of become productive?
I'm sorry, Sanjeev.
Okay, so ahead, Francis.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sorry, I was busy taking notes. What was the ask, Sanjeev?
Yeah, I'm a new member. I'm interested in contributing either to docs or to code. Is there a ramp up procedure? Is there? I mean, we've been talking about contributing to docs as well, but either docs or code. And how can I work? Is there a ramp up roadmap? Is there somebody I can temporarily work with?
I mean, if you're willing to contribute docs, I mean, welcome aboard.
I need some initial mentoring and partnership with somebody that's already sort of in the thick of it.
I actually think writing docs might be a good way to get started. So we don't really have an onboarding per se, but if it sounds like somebody's got a doc somewhere, maybe John made it, that basically lists a bunch of things that we should write docs for. So maybe we can just give you one of those topics and have you work with one of the ztunnel/Istio developers to sketch that out, maybe as like a kind of like a first onboarding project. That'll at least kind of get you familiar with what some of the bits and pieces of what we're building and whatnot. I don't know. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
So I posted the link that Keith posted in chats, right, in the note doc. Sanjeev, take a look at this one first in terms of the documentation reviewers' requirements, responsibilities. And then in there, there's another link to how to review contents guide. That's see, that's working with GitHub. Yeah, so maybe this is not quite the documentation I was thinking of, the ramp up doc that you're referring to.
So thinking loud here, I mean, we already have some blog contents. Maybe I think it might be a little bit tricky to write new contents. Maybe you could potentially help us move some of our blog contents to docs as an initial contribution, because I think that's also well needed.
Yeah, happy to work with anybody on any of these topics. I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with Istio and related concepts and multi-cluster and so on, but have not been directly involved in Ambient yet.
Lynn, would you want to point him at what needs to be done there?
Yeah, feel free to pin me. I would appreciate if you can actually help us move some of our blogs to docs. I think that would potentially fill out a couple of empty pages for us.
Oh, okay. Contact you on Slack.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackie, you have a hand?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe if some of those like blog translations or like you mentioned, Nathan mentioned John had a list of ambient related documentation that needed to be done, or it at least was broken apart. It'd be great maybe if those are translated into issues on GitHub and were labeled with good first issues. I mean, just I think making it easier for newer people to know what to contribute to. And then just having those be like smaller broken down tasks, because I think some of the remaining like good first issues are really broad, like add more test coverage, but it'd be great if you could point to where to add the test coverage or point to what exact doc or what exact blog to translate into a doc. I think that would be helpful.
So serialize John's brain into issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I posted a link to that list. It's in a GitHub issue. The 42750. John's comment there. The issues for ambient alpha, but I think that and some of it's already done, but I think there are some others there that still need to be done, and we might just want to remove alpha from that issue and just say Docker plan for ambient.
Narendra?
Yeah, just wanted to kind of follow up on this kind of sort of distinction between the blogs and the documentation. Because like I also noticed this when I was reading about certain Istio features, like for example, discovery selectors. There's a blog for it, but not like a document for it. So like just going forward, like what, I guess like what is purpose of the blog and like what is the purpose of the doc? Also from like the perspective of someone like who might want to write about some other feature or functionality for Istio, like which I guess should I go for?
Yeah, so I wish we have a page there that can answer your question. So my understanding could be biased. So blog, I think it's not like a living document. It's one time or showcase a particular feature that's added, just recently added to an upcoming release or a release that was just released. Well, the doc is a living thing where we intend to keep it updated for every single release.
That sounds about right to me as well. Although, yeah. So I think if I remember right, at the top of a blog, it tags a release that it was tested against. Is that right, Lynn? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, typically blog would have like steps, that say, for this environment, this version, I tried this. Yeah, well, with the doc, we would try to, if the page is tested, we would test with every single release.
Right, and to Lynn's earlier point about docs reviewing taking a long time, I think blogs allowed us to kind of circumvent some of that process as well. Like I think the quality of the blogs may not be quite as high as the regular docs, certainly not maintained either.
All right, so I think next up, there are a few things that we can get started. So first, Eric, you will bring to TOC's attention about getting more resource and contribution to the docs.
Yep, placeholder already in the
And
schedule.
Thank you. As far as the blog articles and turning to documentation, do we have consensus on that's what we should do? Anyone? Then
I missed the
I mean,
last part of that. Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say it seems like a good jumping off point, since some of this is already like, you know, at least partially tested and proven out that the blog works, as opposed to just starting from scratch and trying to come up with it off the top of your head.
okay. Do we have a list of those blog articles?
It's on our blogs page. I don't recall which exactly one. I mean, I have no experience with architect information, so I just feel some of those contents could be potentially used.
Okay, so we'll review those and see which ones can be turned into the initial set of docs.
I think we have a lot of people interested in helping with stocks. So I think what Jackie suggested is good. We should break into individual items, make sure people are not step on each other's toes, and then they can feel comfortable to contributing. So John, maybe I'll take a pass on this, and then you can chime in to see if I miss anything on the doc side. Okay, sounds good.
I'd also be happy to help create the issues if once you've done that pass. You have more context than I do, but I'm happy to create the issues, help there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I'll tag you as well. I know Andrea also said interested in helping with stock and Sanjeev too. So sounds like we have more people willing to help, which is a great problem.
Yeah, and any like PM type of tasks, feel free to like tag me on those as well.
We have support for everything except actually writing docs, but that's fine.
Well, Nate, it's simple, right? You take to the keyboard and start typing.
I did that before I paid my dues, my friend.
All right, I think we've beaten this horse to death, at least for now. All right. Anything else on people's mind? All right. If there's nothing else, then I wish everybody a great day.
Later, guys.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.